This is Marlies from Cure Health, and today we're talking to Glen from Quantum Life. And Glen, I'd like to ask you to please tell us, how did you get into quantum health and how did that all start for you?
Yeah, so career was design, corporate design. Was spending a lot of time on screens, 18 hours a day, sometimes longer, night and day, and doing a lot of design work, obviously indoors, bad lifestyle, bad diet, not enough grounding and sunlight, and progressively during one of the projects I was busy with, I started getting a weakness in my neck, struggled with a bit of dizziness, and it sort of crept up on me, and within a two-week period I was unable to walk properly or balance, and that resulted in me being basically unable to drive and unable to do normal daily things. So the result was I ended up on my back in bed, and that prompted a whole lot of medical investigations.
So your function while you were bedridden, basically?
Very little. I could move slightly, but very slowly. I wasn't able to even crawl to the toilet, for instance, which was quite a disturbing place to be. I couldn't really do anything. I mean, I was active before and literally not active, literally within a couple of weeks of that sort of happening.
So you lived an active life before, and what would, I suppose, be considered as a typical life, being indoors mostly?
Well, look, I mean, I would be obviously working and on the weekends I'd be out in the bush doing all kinds of things, taking care of my sport. I was involved in some really interesting hobbies, restorations of certain antique items and so on. And yeah, that all kind of stopped, and it got to the point, obviously I was quite fond of being in the kitchen, and that all stopped. I couldn't cook for myself, I couldn't do anything.
So within a few weeks of deterioration, you landed on your back. You couldn't do anything for yourself.
Yeah.
And you had no idea why, and no one could tell you why.
Well, a lot of medical investigations were taking place, and MRIs, CTs, blood tests, and various sonars, scans, X-rays, you name it.
It must have cost a fortune.
Yeah, I would sort of estimate, when I did it sort of tally up, it was in the region of about 450,000 Rand with co-payments and medical aid support.
And this is about 10 years ago. How long?
Yeah, 10-ish, between 10 and 15 years ago. That time of my life was a bit of a blur, so difficult to give you an exact date, but the outcome of the medical investigation was nobody knew what was going on. There was absolutely no light at the end of the tunnel. The only suggestion from one neurosurgeon was, let's fuse your neck bones together, and unfortunately...
And what would that have done?
Well, it didn't make sense to me, because looking at the structural integrity of the spine and skeleton, everything was intact. There was nothing mechanical. So their suggestion was, let's just bolt your bones together, and I decided then this is quite far down into the year, and I just decided, no, well, this is not happening. So I embarked on a self-study process, teaching myself, learning. I got hold of a guy in the States who's quite a left field neurosurgeon, Dr. Jack Kruse. I started following his work and learnt a lot, and it was
Pestered him.
I pestered him.
And at that stage, you could still reply to
Yeah.
individuals all over the world.
Well, there was interaction intermittently, but at the end of the day, his suggestions were get outside on the ground in the sun as the sun rose, and obviously being a logical human being that's been programmed to think the way we all think, based on how medical science tell us things are. I thought it was a bit crazy, but I did it anyway. My partner at the stage then helped me to get outside, and literally within a couple of days,
You had to be dragged outside, and you were left early
Yeah,
morning on the grass.
I got out on the grass in the morning, and within a week or so, I started noticing sensation returning and ability to move, fingers moving, toes moving, legs feeling stronger. Although I was already so thin, I'd lost all my muscle mass. It was very weak, and it was a sort of a slow process of changing my diet to a more sort of ketogenic diet. I'd tried veganism prior for about 18 months, and that really didn't possibly contributed to my weakness or the onslaught of what happened to me. And yeah, I eventually sort of stabilized a little bit. I'd started playing around with electrolytic balance, making my own electrolytes, really catering to my diet correctly, and yeah, I could then sit up properly, balance, move my arms around, my legs a little bit, and then eventually sort of sitting slowly but surely, then standing, holding a chair, and then a couple of months to walk again. And as a result of my studies, which at that stage were sort of almost 24 hours a day.
So sorry, was that your biggest intervention, your biggest shift that you saw from everything that you learned up to that stage?
What being able to
advice from Jack Kruse?
I'd studied a lot of things and a lot of people's work, and read lots of scientific papers and medical documents that one had to dig out of the archives because they're just not available anymore. And I would say, Jack Kruse's initial stuff was very over my head, medically speaking. But with a prolonged exposure to those, the terminology and the understanding, and obviously cross-pollinating that with what other people were saying, I'd pretty much say that Dr. Jack Kruse, his approach, although being very left field in terms of medical approaches, it speaks of the laws of the quantum laws of nature, being water, light, and magnetism, and then if one starts piecing together the science behind why he's saying these things, one develops an idea or a structural understanding of an approach or a methodology that he follows. And yeah, he pretty much saved my life in terms of, try this out and see what happens. And that prompted me, after getting better, to revise my life. And I, at that stage, already decided that I was going to terminate my current lifestyle and work situation. So that prompted me to sort of then get more study behind me, and between then and now we're probably looking at anything between 60 and 90,000 hours worth of study, mountains of documentation and scientific research. And yeah, I've sort of dedicated myself now to a point where I decided this is what I want to do, is help people that are in a situation that the medical solutions that are out there can't help. And I haven't really looked back. Sort of been practicing as a bioenergetic quantum clinician now for the better part of 5 years, and seeing some really interesting results with some really, really difficult and complicated medical situations or physical afflictions and symptoms. So yeah, that's the short of it, really. Obviously, I still study and keep up to date with what's new. Jack Kruse is always a source of new and exciting perspectives. The more
can I go back to that briefly?
Yeah.
I'm still trying to get over how you are on your back for a whole year. And the way I remember the story you told me first was Jack eventually said to you, "Why are you so persistent? You're not a practitioner. What's going on?"
Yeah, it was something along those lines. It was like I was dealing with some of the blogs that he had. He'd respond to certain people and he would respond to me in bits and pieces, whether it was him or whether it was one of his people responding. I'm not quite sure. Nowadays it's really difficult to get a hold of him directly. He's got a whole team of people that obviously help him do things. And
when he understood that you are paralyzed,
well,
he said, this is your next step.
Sort of in blogs and asking questions, and then there's responses and other people comment and so on. He would sort of, in between the lines, he would say, like, look, this is, what's the diagnosis? And there wasn't any. So he basically worked out that the melanin in my body, based on the DHA, which was depleted by massive exposure to blue light, had basically vanished. I didn't have melanin sheeting in my body, which are very important for electrical communication, specifically in the nervous system and the decentralized nervous system outside of the normal nervous system, which is all driven by a lack of power as well via the mitochondria. So you're looking at a multi-pronged attack on the body where the energy production is wrong, the inability to have DHA and maximize sunlight, apart from the fact that melanin does other things. But bad diet also affects the energy levels, because you're spiking insulin all the time. Eventually your pancreas gives up. So at that stage I also had type 2 diabetes, very bad eyesight, numbness and tingling in feet and that sort of thing, which is very, very indicative of a diabetic situation. So there was a lot of things going on. Brain fog, inability to think, inability to rationalize what I was doing, like physically moving and so on, which I boiled down to at this stage of the game is a lack of charge in the body, which I've subsequently realized is the root of where illness begins. So the cascade of various afflictions that I was exposing myself to had damaged me, but I think the majority of the damage was probably done by lengthy exposure to blue light and non-native EMF. So Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, obviously incandescent bulbs were no longer available, so it was all LED lighting. So all of these things played a part in breaking down my melanin structure, which is DHA based. And on that basis, as humans, we're not only running on energy from food, we also run on energy from the sun, and also energy from the ground, which is basic electron collection, which is what your body runs on, is a negative charge. And obviously there were other things as well. So, environmental toxins, cell phone towers in the environment, of which there were 3 around my home at that stage. And then living close to or in the path of an airport, being Lanseria, with a lot of fuel dumping and that sort of thing as well. So I suppose that it was a multifaceted approach, or multifaceted damage from various toxins, of which I think blue light was probably the most dangerous.
That sounds very in sync with what Jack Kruse talks about almost entirely lately, is your balance between blue light, your light from screens, Wi-Fi, EMFs, versus your exposure to sunlight, including the infrared, and grounding.
Yes.
it sounds like you obviously had to change diet and lifestyle. Well, you were incapacitated to do that for yourself.
Yeah.
But the biggest shift came when you got your sun exposure back, particularly infrared, early in the morning.
Yes. That's
And,
specifically what I was told to do, is get on the ground like the Sphinx. It was a bit difficult initially, but when you're lying on your stomach or lying on your back on the ground, eventually it turned it into a lifestyle where every single morning and every single afternoon and during the day, exposure to sunlight was charging me up. And obviously with slight diet changes, moving away from lots of carbohydrates, fruits, nuts, grains, sugar, and rather looking at sort of proteins and fats, made a massive difference in terms of how my body was renovating energy, which allowed it to repair. So it goes back to the stages of, if you've got a drop in energy, you're going to get sick.
So you, alongside the diet changes you've made by getting your sun and grounding, you started restoring your melanin structure.
Yes,
and
absolutely.
Re-energizing your system on a mitochondrial level, really.
Yes, well, I technically went feral because so I became like a free range human. I was running around in a pair of denim shorts all day with no top, no shoes on, and
because you knew what that did for your body.
Yes, I used to. I moved my whole lifestyle. While I wasn't sleeping, I was outdoors in the sun all day. Built up what Jack calls a solar callus, which is the eyes getting the light at the correct time, so your circadian switch, which is your suprachiasmatic nucleus, which switches your circadian biology into the correct clock timing, which I was literally outdoors all day. But what happened was I went from being a rather pale human to slowly exposing myself to the sun until my skin had reached its maximum point of tanning over a period of months, and I could then stand in the midday sun all day and not burn, provided I was grounded.
And also not harm yourself, which is something that will come up a lot in our future videos that we're working on.
Yes, so
counter to the main narrative that the sun is mainly dangerous, more than being helpful and healthy.
Well, if you look at nature, you can't cheat nature. I don't see animals walking around with sunglasses and sunblock and tackies and clothing. So if the sun was that dangerous, why are they still okay? We've been programmed to think that we need to be indoors under artificial light, wearing clothes and insulated from the ground, and then wonder why we're ill. This is what Jack sort of was hammering away in the early years, and it's become sort of commonplace now to hear quantum biologists speak about this, but it's fundamentally important to reintegrate yourself with nature, because ultimately it's nature that allows us to thrive. Everything fits inside the photosynthetic web, and everything grows because of the sun. So if you continue to hide from the sun, the outcome will be that nature will punish you severely, as it did me.
Well, you'll bear the consequence of not,
Absolutely.
the natural consequence of not following the quantum laws of nature.
Absolutely.
So a couple of years ago, you couldn't find a lot about quantum health online.
No.
Very, very little. And now, actually in the last 1 or 2 years, I think it's become very prevalent.
Yes.
Would you like to get into a brief description of
Yes.
quantum laws of nature?
Well, look, just speaking to that, if you look at what I'd learnt over those years, and the fact that there was very little happening on any media about quantum biology or the laws of nature, until literally the middle of last year, all of a sudden there was a massive explosion of people talking about all of these things. So I didn't feel so alone anymore, because obviously I was trying to practice this as a practitioner, and people were just not getting the picture. They were like, "Who you? You're not a doctor. What do you think you're doing?" And questioning my integrity, despite the successes that I've had with a lot of people. And yeah, it's very refreshing now that people are also out there, especially the medical field, are adopting these principles in terms of looking at them as healing modalities as opposed to what is currently available.
I would say if you want to resolve anything and not just treat a symptom with a chemical, with a side effect,
Yeah.
but you're actually looking to resolve stuff on a root cause level.
Yes.
I call it reset back to design, back to how you were created. Somewhere you'll have to consider the quantum laws of nature, because that is how we were designed to thrive.
Yes.
Light, water, magnetism.
Yes. No. So in the perspective of light, obviously natural light is key because it's full spectrum. Your body has photobiomodulation capabilities in the form of red light chromophores in the mitochondria, which help to generate energy. In fact, initiate the generation of energy in the body. Water, in terms of how we think about water coming out of a tap, this is dead water that is not mineralized the way it would be vortexed. Victor Schauberger's work in terms of vortexing water in streams, how it actually works and picks up minerals.
Yes,
So when I talk about water, I would speak about mineralized or highly mineralized water. And then grounding obviously has to do with the pH of the body, and not necessarily in an alkaline acids perspective, but pH meaning potential hydrogen, which is a hydrogen proton positive charge, which is negative or deleterious to the way the body runs. So you actually need electrons from sunlight. You need the minerals in the body to maintain its fourth state gel water, which is basically a battery. And then obviously you collect electrons from food, and then you collect also electrons from the ground. So in combination, your body has 3 levels of fuel input. So in combination with the laws of nature, obviously high density nutritional profile food, which is species specific, which is predominantly amino acids and fatty acids, allows the building blocks of the body to put together the collagen network and the structure. And then obviously with the added energy from all those sources, runs on an optimal level. So Jack always talks about, you've got a Ferrari in your head. You need to feed the Ferrari the correct fuel. So obviously there's mitigating circumstances like environmental toxins and external influences which also damage the body. And obviously everything in the body runs with the microbial input, and the mitochondria are also a bacterium that don't necessarily belong to our genome. They're actually a prokaryote, like a plant. So they actually do have call it photosensitive capabilities, or like photosynthesis, and people don't realize that this is the case. So they'll listen to the dermatologist, just tell them hide away from the sun because it's going to give you cancer, and that at the end of the day ends up with having no vitamin D in your body, which means that that's a precursor to cancerous skin lesions like melanoma.
And all of those patients are low in vitamin D, which if it
Absolutely.
was as a result of too much sun,
Absolutely.
you'd be high in vitamin D. But I want to leave it there for today. We've touched on a huge variety of things, and I love your perspective. And even though it might sound complicated now, the science behind it might be technical, but getting back to quantum laws of nature and how your body was designed is actually very simple. So I'm looking forward to getting into some of those details in future videos. I hope you enjoyed today's chat.